When Iggy makes a face like that,
We have nothing to worry about.
Gogeta, your ass is in my face.
I get it. Oh, yeah, baby. Hope you're right.
Now I remember.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Me and Adam here today, and we're going to be talking about Air Gear. Air Gear, written and drawn by O Great, that's his pen name. He's done a lot of series. One of note is Tengo Tenge. I talked about that a long time ago, and we'll get into more about that later. This was published in 2002, ended in 2012 in Weekly Shonen Magazine. You got big hitters like Fairy Tail and Nanatsu no Taizai. One of my favorites, Yamada-kun. Some good manga in there. And with 357 chapters, and then there was a special 358 that came out 3 years later. You don't really see that happen too often with that big of a gap. Cool, man. And Adam, since you told me I should check it out, what's the story about, man? What's going on?
I know you mentioned this to me before, but I didn't really look at Air Gear as a sports manga until you mentioned that to me, and then I had to sit there, and as I'm rereading it, before we were doing the episode, I was like, dang, dude, you know what? You're right, this is a sports manga. No matter how you look at it, it really is. But essentially what you have is you got your main character. His name is Iki, pretty much like the Kuwabara Yusuke of his, little high school, right? Or middle school, I should say. Then he ends up getting beat up by some kids with air treks, which is, rollerblades, but you could actually like glide on the sky. You can like grind all over buildings and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a skateboard for your feet, but you can like go all over the place with it. So he ends up getting his own pair of air treks from his sisters, his orphan family. And then the story progresses from there. He has his own team of people that he made up with, people he grew up with, like Kazu, Onigiri. And then it gets into a whole fucking bonkers ride, man. Like, and we're gonna really get into that. But essentially, it's the premise of it, the way it started, I will always love because it made a lot of sense. Like, okay, you want to fight for your territory, you gotta battle your emblems out. Okay, I slap my emblem on yours, just like I slap your girl's butt. This is mine now. Now we got to go through a battle for it. Just seeing all that happen in the first, 100 chapters was really, really nice. And then we got into a whole nother realm of like, now the world is at stake. Genetically engineered children who like can withstand gravity and like air at different levels. It's fucking crazy. But this was one that I read. I think this was one of the first mangas I really, really got into when I started getting into manga back in high school. So this one is pretty near and dear to me. I've read it a good couple times. There's a lot of things I don't agree with, a lot of things I do agree with, but I think at the end of the day, it's a ride.
Boy, is it a wild ride, and part of that comes from, like you said, where I think this is a sports manga, is because it likes to take the ridiculousness a lot of sports mangas do. It being air treks and what they did in the beginning of the series, I was like, oh yeah, that's where I thought we were going to be in the whole time. This nice circle of like, we got teams, they're competing, crazy wild industrial environments, and there's always different types of games with rules, and seeing our characters progress. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is pretty standard. I can see where this is going. And then next thing you know, like you said, there's these genetically modified children. They're people are getting superpowers now. Our main character, Iki, learns a technique where he can hold the air and kind of like shoot it out, like with some chakra bullshit.
Dude, you know what I thought of? He literally had like the 6 paths of pain. Like how Pain's move, Pain's whole jutsu in Shippuden was like gravity and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
That's exactly what he was doing, but like using the surface of his palms to hold all that in. I remember when I was reading that, I was like, okay, come on, man. I'm all for the nonsense. But this one, see, I like how they introduced it, where it was him and you soon find out later on, the antagonist of the show, Sora. They're both in the hospital, and he's like, okay, how many panties can he flip up using this technique? So I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, and I was totally for that level because, again, with the sports manga absurdity, we see a lot of that happen. But then, as we keep trekking further into the story, the amount of powers just gets so over the top. It's like you're thrusted in a different world. Like, this wasn't the same series as what I was kind of thinking here and there. Because, like, there's a point where, like, there's, like, a tornado giant in the ocean that's being created by a bunch of kids, and they're all connected by wires to make the body frame. I was like, oh my gosh, dude. And then, we see illustrations of these people's quote-unquote powers, and they're just, like, these metal-ass looking stands. It's so crazy.
And that's just, I mean, those are just some of the few examples. A great person to look at for the ridiculousness is probably Bucha. He's this huge dude, maybe like 6 foot something, weighs like 300 pounds, but he can move his like blood flow to like shift that weight to be super buff or super skinny. And I'm never going to forget that battle with Orca where he's underwater and then he shifts all that weight over to his legs and he's just got like the perfect like Saitama look from like upper body up, and then like his calves are just like Arnold Schwarzenegger calves. It was great. One of my favorite scenes by far.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Good comedy in here as well. All compliments into the art style. Oh. And man, the art could be varying in between what's going on in the situation. Just the detail that he could put in when things get serious. That's one thing I really like about this mangaka. I believe I said it in the Tengo Tenge episode as well. Is like his art is phenomenal. It's of course he's perfected the ecchi art as well. That's one of the big selling points at the beginning. But once the manga can be big enough to move past that, whew, man, some of these fights,
they're insane. And I know we've talked about it before, but just the attention to detail that he does. So it's like, okay, like he could do the ecchi stuff. He's known for it. But when he really gets down and like has to do an actual battle, there's so much going on, involved. And then especially when we get to the whole like legendary regalia, like the legendary parts that people have for their air treks, and then they end up having stands with them. Like some of those stands, I look at them and I say stands very loosely because that's just the best way to explain it. But when you look at them, it's like, that's a lot of detail, for one panel alone.
It's really great. And another favorite part, I think, with this series specifically is like the stylization he likes to do. It being air gears, and flying around through cities and all of that. It's very, you could say like Jet Set Radio type of thing. Mm-hmm. And when he has like the chapter covers, it totally feels like it's from that era. And I really like the chapter covers when he can do that, especially when, again, he goes into these super abstract, different types of art style, like really flexing his capabilities that he has. It's I would say, best aspect he has.
I still have not read Tengo Tenge. I think I might eventually one day just to see a little bit more of his other work. But I will agree, I just finished moving and I found the last 2 volumes of Air Gear that I copped a long time ago. I mean, and they're the JP ones. But just there's those last 2 volumes, I was like, man, this is where it got really crazy, but it got so good. But I love those covers, especially the last volume, because it just has all this really intense coloring with Iki and the worst girl in the show, Ringo.
The worst girl. Yeah, that's a statement right there, buddy.
I can't, man. I can't with Ringo. She just there's so many good characters in this series. Yeah, I guess it's a really good segue. There's a lot of really good characters in the series, but some of the main ones I feel didn't get the spotlight they deserved. Ringo was one of them. Rika, the old sleeping forest queen, definitely another one. I feel like she should have got some more. And then we had some other side characters who ended up getting so much great stuff, like really, really good coverage. Like we got Kazu, Emily or Adachi, those characters. I'm like, okay, you know what? This is great. You really deserved it. But Ringo, I'm not going to say she deserved it either because I still don't like her character.
Yeah.
But it was really, really unfortunate that she did not get anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that has to say that reflects O'Great's writing when he does what he does. Like I mentioned before, Tengo Tenge, the reason I bring it up is because when I was reading this series, knowing this is the mangaka, part of me took a step back. I'm like, this is its own thing. Let's check it out. But another part of me was, I know what I don't like from this guy. Let's see how much of that is in here. It's very similar as far as the structure of the story goes. And I think that's just what he likes. You know, he likes to bring in this cool, interesting premise, fun characters, everyone's having a good time. And then when shit starts hitting the fan, he likes to just jump up that kind of next level. Like we've been talking on our Webtoon segment about God of High School and how the escalation went over there. I feel like it's kind of similar to here. And I think at the end of the day, it has to do with him liking the idea of having a mythology in your series. Because in Tengo Tenge, yeah, it goes so crazy with that. And then coming in here, it did catch me off guard of how crazy things got when we meet a character, what is it, Rukaka, right? And just seeing like where she's, what group she's with, which is the Toes or whatever they were called.
Yeah, the Tool 2
Tool
crew.
2s, yeah. And just seeing how, and it's like a religious aspect it kind of is towards ATs and like the roles that they have to do, the story behind what are these special pieces called regalia. I thought like ATs weren't even around that long, but then just to see like all of this lore coming from them. And then of course, like again, the genetically modified children, gravity children they're called, and specifically why they're called that is, you know, because you have to go crazy depths into the earth to get these sky regalia. Like everything was just so crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is just what he likes at the end of the day. That's why he likes to go these ridiculous routes towards the end of the series.
Right. And I feel like, again, this is the only thing I've read from O'Grey, but just in the beginning, when Iki first gets his air tracks and Rika finds out, she's like, don't be like Icarus. You know, you get too close to the sun, your wings are going to melt. So just from that alone, when I first started reading, I'm like, okay, we're going to go this route eventually, you know, but I don't know where exactly you're going to pull it out of your ass from. But as the story goes on, I'm like, okay, I see this is clearly something that you really do like, you know. It wasn't really necessary in a lot of the points of the story, but I see where he wanted to go. And at least from my perspective, I'm like, it kind of works. It makes sense to like a very thin degree. Like there's a real thin line that he's walking. But then again, you have the ridiculousness that comes with it. Like speaking of Tool 2, you know, they're so into the gears of the ATs, you know, and the regalias that they train kids, you know, or women
High
specifically,
schoolers. Yeah.
high schoolers, to learn to tune, you know, all kinds of mechanical things. Like, so they're pretty much like all engineers. But the thing that gets me about them, and I remember you told me this, Danny, was you're like, dude, why are they taking off their clothes to hear better?
Yeah. There's a specific battle going on with one of the main team members in Iki's group, Agito, and he needs to get his ATs tuned by one of the supporting characters who's friends with Emily. I forget her name. But yeah, she's just like, no wonder they take their clothes off. I can't hear the gears. And I was like, what are you talking? Like the ruffling of your clothes? Like that's where the ridiculousness is like a little too much for me.
And I'm with you on that. But man, was it so great? Like there's that scene where they're fighting the old sleeping forest, and Akito is like, hey, to, I forget her name. I think it's like something with an S, Shiragane, whatever her name is. But he goes to her and he's like, I need you to tune me. She goes, I don't even know what I'm doing. He's all, just listen to my heartbeat and you'll figure it out. And then she's like, I can hear you, but I can't really hear you. And then she takes off her clothes. And I'm like, come on, man. Was that really necessary? Like when we got the introduction in Tool 2, I'm like, that makes sense because they have like a skin tight suit like over it, you know, like it makes a little bit more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then in that situation, I thought, you know what, you're just throwing it in here now. You want to have this fan service for, you know, the ship that people want to see. That's fine. I'll give it to you.
Yeah, and that also ties into I have to figure out what to do with this character because she's always there. And she's friends with Emily, right, who is arguably one of the best girls in the series. And
Definitely.
even she started doing stuff that was crucial to the plot, albeit at the end pretty ridiculous with the fact that another important character that is Obama and how she interacts with him was just too much, man.
Dude, Obama coming out in the series was so good. He didn't have to, he didn't have to put him in there, but he did, and I'm like, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, every now and then you'll see a president cameo in a manga, but to have him have solid dialogue, to have him be a main character, and
Right, to have like an actual directive, like that's crazy. That's where I'm like, you know what? That's as bonkers as you really can get.
But yeah, so aside from all that, as far as the structure of the story goes, this is a take 2, by the way, for the podcast. So I'm trying to remember what we covered before.
I know, me too.
Apologies for that, but the way, like I said before, mythology is a big deal, and so things get a little too over the top to the point where it's just like, oh, the fate of the world is decided on who gets this sky regalia. And to me, that lost my interest for the most part, as far as like the essence of the story and what it's about. Like our main character Iki even it's brought up to him a few times while all this crazy stuff's going on with this final tournament and having to fight Sora, who is the old Sky King and all that. And the question was like, why are you doing this? Why are you writing ATs? What's the point? And he brought it up very early on in the series that he just wants to have fun, fly in the sky. That's why they made the group. Like you can see the life coming out when they're all together, the joy that's there. And I think because part of it was just me thinking this is the manga like the whole time, and then for them to get super serious and kind of lose that aspect, that's where I was like, it was kind of falling down for me.
No, and I definitely see that. I think on my reread, I really noticed that a lot more this time around, because once we get to the Behemoth fight, that's really where things start changing like drastically. Which the Behemoth fight is probably one of my favorite fights in the entire series, hands down. Because it's just it sticks to the formula. It's like, hey, we are now like Class D rank, riders. We're gonna do a Class D rank battle, which is we're gonna go inside a cage and we're gonna fight all respectively to the other person. So it really showed like, hey, this is what we can do just with the Class D rank battle. And then it goes all the way up to A and it starts off at F. So, you have like the hurdle, the race, the balloon, the cage. I think there's another one, but like it's just seeing all that was really, really nice. I wasn't too big a fan seeing Sora like be an actual villain. I think you said the same thing last time, Danny, because like when Sora comes out, you kind of get the idea that, hey, you know what? He's going to be that father figure to Iki. He's going to be like big brother, like look out for him, show him the ropes, because it seems that he can't do anything because he's in a wheelchair. But hell no. Homeboy says, nah, man, I built my own legs.
Yeah, I cut my legs off on purpose because I know I'm gonna build my own. Like,
dude, that screamed big edgy guy.
He goes like pure JoJo villain at the end, if you kind of think about it, right? Because like his hair turns all white. He stabs his eyes and his ears.
He goes, I don't need that anymore. I can feel everything. I just need to feel the air around my body, and I know where to go.
So ridiculous. And then, of course, just to talk about the final fight, like right in the middle of it, he's just like, oh, it's time to get serious, huh? Okay. Pulls a thing out of his pocket. He's like, hey, what's that? It's like, oh, these are the batteries to my ATs. And then a character, like, not even near the battlefield's like, yeah, he's never turned those things on, ever. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's, you go from that, and then you go from when we were first introduced to him, and he's like, oh, he was an AT person until he got into an accident, and now he's in a wheelchair. But then we see him doing AT tricks in a wheelchair, and I'm like, this is pretty fucking cool.
That was great. I'm not gonna lie. That was so cool for him to be as mobile as he was in that wheelchair, like for majority of the series.
And he was really written to be very likable too. I thought he was just going to be like that the whole time, kind of like the Urahara of the series, right? That's what he kind of felt like.
Yep.
And I guess that was on purpose, right? Because then once we get the reveal he's the bad guy is when you get that emotional, like, oh, what? The distraught you get from that, right? That Iki also got.
Yeah, and I feel that that's where that deliverance really, really was killer because you could see it on Iki. Like, we have a whole small arc dedicated to how he's feeling. And as the audience, you're like, dude, I thought Homeboy was going to stay here like the whole way through as the good guy. Like, it was going to be somebody else, but no. And I felt that was a really, really good twist on Oh Great's part.
And, I say I miss the wholeheartedness. There is some good stuff that gets pretty serious, too. And, of course, the main aspect is when it comes to the fighting. It's, again, really good. The way he draws it, the way everything is so sharp and precise. It's really solid stuff. And also, like, when it's not over the top, the creativity he can have with ATs can get cool. I still think it's a little ridiculous whenever we see like a people wearing like AT armor suits or like they have gauntlets on their arms. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that part's a little unnecessary.
And see, it gets ridiculous too when they're in official like matches and people are wearing those still. And I'm like, how is this legal? What is, it gets crazy. But
it's like, ref, hold on, ref, get over here.
Hold on, Chief, something don't look right. But on the flip side, though, one of the favorite characters is Yoshitsune and Benki, right? They're pretty cool. And Benki, with a strong character design, we actually get to see her go all out a few times. And then one of the times, she gets passed a staff to use, but the staff has AT parts on each end. And I thought, oh, okay, cool, that's nice, it's original. It goes with what we have for the tech. That's not mechs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I really like about this series. Is like the creativity behind it.
I definitely agree. And like it's not just those fellas, but like the way they use their ATs, and this kind of gets into like a ridiculous realm, but let's talk about Aeon Clock for a second. This guy can supposedly stop time, or stop the movement of somebody, and then I do like, it's probably a whole bunch of horseshit, but I do like the when Ku, the little crow that lives in Iki's hair, comes out and he goes, "Let me explain this."
Yeah.
I'm like, it's probably horseshit, but I'll take it anyway. Just that kind of creativity was really, really cool. Spitfire kind of made sense. Like, hey, I can go so fast, I can like give off friction, to make flames appear. The gem regalia to make like earth shake, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Rumble for sound, like all the different kinds of special regalia, like they all have something really, really cool about them that actually make a little bit of sense, depending on how you look at it. And I think that's just where he really flourished in his creative side. And then as the battles get more intense, like I'm gonna go back to that one with Orca and Bucha where they're fighting underwater, where ATs really shouldn't work underwater. That's not how it's supposed to go. But he had made it in a way like, no, there's like wind going through like all these bubbles in the water. I'm like, okay, I see where you're going with it. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and of course, like with Ringo's regalia too, or like the quote unquote regalias, right? The thorn ones, and how the back wheels can turn into this whip. Like, all that stuff is really cool. And even during the very serious final fight, we get something that was laid out like many chapters before. Like you don't even remember. But like you said, with the air bubbles in the water, airplanes in the sky, like paper airplanes in the sky for Iki to use to get that leverage and stuff, like all that was really good. It's the best quality that you can get out of this series.
Definitely. But man, I say this off the air, dude. It really should have been Kururu. It should have been Ringo.
That's the problem, because it was kind of like that too in his other series, where it's like the female lead, you already know what's going to go down. Just off the first chapter, you already get an understanding of how we're going to see where our characters end off with each other. And I was like, cool, it makes sense, but when you have a more likable character that has just as good a chemistry, or even better than your main heroine, that's a problem. The fact that Oh Great forgot, I guess maybe forgot or just didn't want to dive more into Iki's feelings with her, right? Because remember, they asked him, like, okay, just your mind's blank. Who's the first person pop up in your head? And then it wasn't Ringo.
And it was her, and then she calls him. Dude, that part gets me every time, man.
The problem right there, too, I guess, is what Ringo was doing at the time, is she was not being her character, right? She was going off of what she's usually been doing the entire series, and that can definitely be off-putting for her. So it's not her fault, but it also kind of is, because she could have done a lot more.
Right. Especially nearing the end where she actually does do more. She's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna go and be my, well, what was her name? Mass Croissant person?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Mass Croissant, yeah.
Yeah, where she like comes in like a leotard, in a mask and like helps out Iki's team. It's like, you could have been doing this the whole time, man. Like that whole part of that where she was gone and it was all Kuru, I'm like, I get it because she's supposed to be Iki's tuner. It makes sense, but she probably could have done a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think that's just his problem with the romance side, because I mentioned like the special chapter that came out right in 2015, 358, and that was sort of to help wrap up everything, because the final chapter didn't really feel like a solid ending for the series. But even there, we have Sigma, right? Like she's sort of the character that moved everything into place to where we got to at the end. And with her interaction with Iki, and it's just still kind of like, oh, okay, so there's harem elements in this series for sure. A lot of shonen series have that, and it's up to the mangaka how he wants to go with it. Are we going to go full harem? Are we just going to get admirations for a lot of characters? What's going to happen? Oh Great kind of just fell short here. When I finished reading Shokugeki, same thing. Everything kind of happened too late on the romance side, as where we were almost at the end of the series. So I'm like, there's no point in going over this, guys. Let's just go with what we think is going to happen, I guess, and hope for the better. So yeah, it really sucks to see it go like that.
But I will say, even though I don't like Ringo as a character for the most part, when she does tell Iki before his last battle, before we get into like the last final arc of the entire series, she's like, hey, in her masked croissant outfit, like, hey, Ringo loves you. Like that whole part, one, it made me mad. Two, when I really thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's the only time you really could do it. Like if you didn't do it before, this is really the only chance that you have. Like to have this moment happen, and it's brief and it makes sense. But then what makes me even more mad is that the scene before that, Ringo goes to Kuru and is all, you need to be his number one fan. And I'm like, dude, just fuck. just do it already. Like, just let it happen. But no, this makes me mad, man.
Yeah, and it's even more clear with our other characters, right? The other obvious ones that I thought was going to happen within the series with Kazu and Emily, as it starts off as more of just kind of like, oh, she's like a fangirl, but then she gains more admiration as he becomes a better character. I thought for sure something was going to happen, but it took until the final chapter for it to go down. I was like, man, like, I think that's the problem with trying to get too big of the series, is you have to drop things to make room for the lore and the writing, and that's just one of those things.
And I feel that's why I think it might have been a good idea to wait, and we never see this happen, to have that last, like, final chapter. But again, I think that final chapter came out around the same time they decided to make an OVA for that Sleeping Forest fight, which I still need to send you the sauce for, because...
Yeah, because that's a fun fight, super anime. Let's go in the VR world and fight the best in their prime type of thing,
Dude, so good. But it's like when I saw that, when it dropped, all I could think of was, why don't you just do the whole series over? Like, where they ended off was such a shit point. I'm like, dude, there was so much more you could have done. But we can only hope that one day somebody will do the good Lord's work and be like, hey, let's bring back Air Gear. We'll do it for the fans. That one guy at Unverse, we'll do it for him.
Yeah, there's always hope for them to come back and do a better adaptation, right? We've seen it with Full Metal. We've
Yep.
seen it with Hunter x Hunter. Heck, Shaman King is getting a remake. I didn't think that series was popular enough to do that.
Yep. I
So
I
that,
remember hearing about that too.
yeah.
And then, dude, we JoJo,
Of course, JoJo, yeah.
Berserk, dude. Like, I mean, so some of these are heavy hitters, and it makes a lot of sense. But I mean, sometimes the small guys need a little help too.
And speaking of the anime, to your recommendation, I did listen to the OST when I was reading it, and that's some solid stuff. Very, very Jet Set Radio vibes. It was
So good.
perfect. Yeah.
Like I used to bump that like on the way to school, just like getting ready for the day.
Hell yeah.
And I highly recommend listening to the OST if you don't want to watch the anime for all those listeners out there. Definitely read the manga, but yeah, the OST is that shit slaps.
Yeah, it's very fitting for the up until like the Behemoth fight,
hmm
all of that stuff. Like it has this total vibes of Jet Set Radio, and that was great.
Man, the more I think about it, the more I really wish it would have just stayed from like that whole sports side of it. I mean, I did like the ridiculousness up to a certain point, but it was just so good. It was just so simple.
Yeah, and thinking if Oh Great could have kept the fun side that Iki and his crew were having when they would fight during these tournaments and like towards the final fight, I think it would have played out better. Like you could keep it as serious as it is, but if they're having a good time at the end, and it'd be one of those things like why so serious? Like not to mean,
Yeah,
but like why be
yeah.
so serious? Like we're just air gearing, dog.
Yeah, I think that would have been great. I know it was subtly hinted at, like at the end of every single battle with the opposing team that Iki fought, like, oh man, like I just want to have fun. Like you just look like you're having so much fun with your buddies, this and that. It was really subtly there, but I agree. If it was more of an apparent thing for Iki's team to be doing that, instead of being like, oh, how the fuck am I gonna do this, I think that definitely would have helped out a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And there's definitely room for that, right? Like easily with like we said, Bucha versus Orca. After that fight, they kind of got along. They were hanging out, and like during the final chapters. With Onigiri, I don't know. He could have just been doing what he usually does.
Dude,
Um,
Onigiri is my boy. That guy
he
embodies horny.
he is the big horny bro. Exactly.
Look,
Yeah.
I don't care what you say, man. He is hands down one of my favorite characters in the series. Like, he's just such a joke, but he was written so well to be that joke.
It's very surprising because this is one of those stories to where with Iki he just started Air Gear, right? Or he just started writing ATs in chapter one,
Mhm.
and now he has to fight the top of the top, and he wants to ride with his friends, but now they have to keep up. And sure, he has some that are already skilled, like Bucha and Agito,
hmm
but then when we have Kazu and Onigiri, they're novices just the same, but they're not main characters, so they're not going to get that special treatment in the story. And it's good with Kazu because we get to see him actually train and get better and actually be entrusted with regalia from Spitfire and just seeing what his character can decide from there. And then with Onigiri, it's like he was just the gag the whole time until he fought Sora's brother and decided to get serious, and then he was drawn seriously, which in itself was like, oh, this is kind of weird, man, because he's got the comical design, right? Like his head is
Yeah,
shaped like an onigiri.
and he rides it upside down. Like he rides just one of the ATs just on his head, like upside down. Like, come on, man. When I first saw that, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's gonna be my favorite. I already know.
Yeah, and when they explained what his power is, right, quote unquote, it's his sweat and then the nitrogen coming out of it. I was like, wait, okay, hold on.
Dude, it's like I said, when they try to explain some of the science stuff, I'm like, dude, this is all horse shit. I know it, but I'm going to listen to it, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to be just accepting it the whole way through.
Yeah, and the fact that he was fighting one of the top people and was actually winning for a while because of that ridiculous power, and then just seeing the giant boar like warrior in the background in the mist, I was like, what the heck is going on, man?
It was so good. It was so good. I needed more of that. If I could have a spin-off of Onigiri, I would take that any day. One of the fights I really liked was I think it was the Behemoth fight. His opponent had like a tattoo of like some kind of beast that would instantly turn people to mankind, like Medusa. And
Oh
because
yeah.
Onigiri's upside down, he goes, "It looks like something else. Doesn't really affect me at all." And she's like showing off his shirt to him, and he goes, "Ooh, but those titties though. Let me see that underboob."
Yeah, man. And that's why I thought, I'm like, oh yeah, he's gonna be like this the whole time. But then, yeah, he got serious. I was like, oh, okay. I guess anything goes at this point at the end. Sure.
Yeah, as much of a gag as some of these characters were, they definitely all had their time to shine. Like Kazu got the regalia from Spitfire. He ended up learning how to stop time for somebody and then having all that flame with him. Onigiri did his thing. Bucha was able to find his nirvana for everything that was going on in his life. Iki obviously uh, got the Storm regalia, which was made from the Rumble regalia, which I'm like, that's pretty cool. So everyone got their own little thing. Emily, she didn't really get nothing. She was just big pimping, but
Big
but
pimpin',
but
yeah.
but everyone had their moment to shine, which I thought was really cool because it kept it consistent. Like, hey, even though these are side characters, and I think this goes with what we were saying earlier, that sometimes he just wants to focus more or make a better story as the story goes on for these characters. He's like, actually, I like them a little bit more now. Let me see what I can do with them. Let me give them a little bit more of spotlight. Like that whole arc where Kazu is fighting Iki in the whole like berserk realm where like everybody's naked at that rave or
Yeah,
whatever.
this weird cult rave going on. Yeah.
Like that whole scene, that whole fight, I thought was pretty great because we got more backstory on Iki and Kazu, like even from when they were children up till now. It's like, okay, if he's gonna stand toe to toe with him and like ride with him, he has to go through this entire battle.
Yeah, and I think that's the best parts of Air Gear is when we can get those character to character moments in fights.
Hmm.
That's really great stuff. Like, I think that's why I think the Behemoth fight's probably still one of my favorites, because we get to see the growth of the characters and where their personalities can shine during those fights, and how unique they could be with their own individuality.
Yep.
It shines for sure.
Dude, like speaking of that, a great example is the first time we see Ringo and Iki go at it. Like seriously go at it. That was an emotional roller coaster, but they really, really hit it off like extremely well where Ringo was like, dude, I'm gonna tear you to pieces with these thorns, man. And he just kept going and going and going. And then we had Best Girl come in and save the day. Like you said, those character to character moments, I think that's what really pushes a series to thrive that much more.
Yeah, all in all, I thought this was a good series. It's definitely better than what I read before in Tengo Tenge, so I'd be down to read something else from him now, just seeing how it goes from here. But yeah, if you're trying to get into Air Gear, I would say definitely read up until Behemoth's fight, and then after that, it's kind of like up in the air for you if you want to see the story get more ridiculous as you go forward, or if you just want to stick with the wholesome stuff.
And I'm gonna say right now, man, we didn't. I think we talked about it the first take we did, but for those folks that are gonna get into it, Akito, man, if you want a depressing story that's like really gonna fuck you, that character was support but made to be a main character, hands down. That's another one I seriously would take a spin-off of just his whole life.
When it comes to big characters like him, there's a lot of backstory and a lot of stuff that we don't have a whole lot of time to dwell in. But yeah, it did catch me by surprise when we got more about his backstory. So that was cool.
Yeah, don't watch the anime. unless you just want to listen to the OST. I have the anime on Blu-ray and DVD, but that doesn't mean anything. You read the manga. I had the Kingdom Hearts effect with that one for sure.
Yeah, you can never go wrong with reading the manga, as I always say.
Yeah. I mean, like we had the Sailor Moon episode drop, the other day, and at the end of the day, really the manga that's the way to go.
So with that, I think it's safe to say, go ahead and wrap up this episode for today. If you have any questions, comments, what you think of Air Gear, you can send us an email on verspodcast@gmail.com. And then we'll definitely talk about that on the next episode. And while we wait for that episode, you can follow us on social media at Unverse Podcast anywhere you go. Let you know when those episodes drop. So thanks, guys. We'll go ahead and catch you on the next episode.
Yo, Uncle Mike, let's take off. Riding through the storm with these AT skates like wings on my feet, trekking on a leap of faith. Ladies call him babyface, but this little crow soars through the sky with a pattern that's unseen to the eye. A blindness, vision's based on the outcome of your perception. This life's foul, son. I'm getting nauseous because his boss's approach, but I'm coached not to accumulate losses. 2 steps is an emblem, not a title. My fam push keys like organs, success is vital. Took a different route on this long ride home. Always stood out for the norm, know I didn't belong. Used to get picked on, but when these AT's on, it's like I'm in a zone of my own. Space and time don't matter at all. I'm riding power lines in the mind, trying to evolve into a king. And I don't need peasants in my presence, I'm just playing. Everybody's equal to a blessing. Had to stop sleeping in the forest of illusion. Now I'm riding waves in the sky cruising. These AT's on my feet, feels like I'm flying through these streets. Time for me to go, might be going for a week, but I won't be far. Look up and you'll see me in these AT's. These AT's.